tomorrow. It's very significant. We take advantage of that opportunity, and I believe I'm not the pessimist that most people are. I think we got a shot at this thing. If the American people are watching carefully, we could pass this thing. I appreciate that, and I yield the floor. The absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. President, thank you. Well, I come down here frustrated and hopeful. I want to try to keep the glass half full, or see the glass half full, even though we've been through a frustrating number of days and months dealing with our debt crisis. And here we are, careening toward another crisis. We went through that earlier in the year. It's really not a good way to legislate. Maybe it's the only way. It seems like the only way we ultimately get things done around here is to take it right up to the edge and then come through with some kind of agreement. I don't think it's fair to the American people. It clearly isn't a formula for providing certainty in our economy for those who are running businesses, for households that are having to make tough decisions. If there's one word that characterizes where we have been this entire year, it's uncertainty. Uncertainty about what the future is going to look like. Are we going to default, or are we not going to default? Do we have enough money to pay the bills, or don't we have enough money to pay the bills? What are the consequences of the default, of a potential default? When we had the continuing resolutions to provide funding for the rest of the year, we went from one extension to another extension to another extension. Everything's in limbo. How can you run an economy? How can a businessman or woman make a decision if they don't know what's coming down the line in terms of taxes, in terms of regulations, in terms of the economic climate, in terms of whether people will be buying, selling, or just sitting on their money? And add to that, into the third year of a slowdown, a recession. Now, the economy's growing, but not growing at a rate that's putting people back to work. We all want to get that economy moving again. And inserting certainty into the process will certainly, no pun intended, be a positive step forward. Now, I think there's virtually unanimous consent that this government has grown too big, it spends too much, it doesn't have the revenues to pay for what it does, and there needs to be a real reform taking place, and taking place soon. We're 12 days away from August 2nd, the date that the Treasury Department has indicated we run out of money and don't have enough to pay our bills. Obligations that have been committed to, promised, can't be paid because we don't have the funds to do so on August 2nd. We have known this day is coming for a long, long time. In fact, we were originally told we run out of money in March, then for some reason it was moved to May, and then again moved to August. I don't know exactly how they're moving money around to Treasury to extend this particular date, but it appears that we now are at the end of the road. We're at the wall, and decisions have to be made. The question is, are we going to take the necessary steps, make the tough decisions, do what we need to do to control our spending, to put in place mechanisms that will ensure that we don't continue to do what's been done over the past several years, and put policies in place that will stimulate our economy and get people back to work. After all, it's really all about jobs. It's all about an economy that is providing opportunities for young people coming out of college to high school, opportunities for people to buy homes and raise their families and save money and send their kids to school, to keep a good-paying job, to be able to pay the mortgage and all the bills that come to the household every month. That's really what it's all about. And unless we address these issues before us here fiscally, we're not going to get to the point where people have any sense or hope for the future. Now, I said I'm frustrated, and I guess I've just expressed some of that frustration, but I'm also hopeful. And I'm hopeful because in times of crisis, solutions can be found. We wish we could do it in a more systematic way. Wish we had done it in the past several months, but we didn't. So here we are. And now I think the focus is clearly on getting to a solution. And so we're debating a plan that has been put forward called Cut, Cap, and Balance. Cut because we're spending more money than we can afford to spend. Cap because we want to put procedures in place not to spend more than we can afford in the future years out, and a balanced budget amendment of the Constitution so that when members come here and put their left hand on a Bible and their right hand in the air and swear to uphold and support and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that Constitution says that you can't spend more than you take in, you need to balance your budget just like households and businesses all across America, and virtually all of our states have these either in statute or in amendment form. The federal government accepted. I don't believe we have the discipline, or that Congress has demonstrated the discipline necessary to run a fiscal house that is anywhere close to balance. Despite all the wonderful speeches, and we're going to cut this and do that and provide for this and provide that, we have just seen an explosion of debt and an explosion of spending, irregardless of what the revenues coming in happen to total. And so a constitutional balanced budget amendment will give us the spine and the backbone and the duty and responsibility to uphold the Constitution in that regard and achieve and make the tough choices, make the tough votes every year. This happens in our state every year. We somehow survive, and in fact, we're doing pretty darn well, because our legislators have to go before the people and say, that's a nice idea, we could go there, but we've got to balance our budget. So now if you're willing, we could raise your taxes to pay for that if you want that extra program, or we can cut another program and substitute the money saved from that for this program, or, folks, we just can't go there. We don't have the money. These are the choices that we have to make, and this is the responsibility that we have. Well, I said I'm hopeful. Why am I hopeful? I'm a baseball fan, a sports fan. I've seen so many, basketball, I've seen so many sports situations where the announcers have said, or the spectators have observed, it's hopeless, there's no way they can come back, there's no way they can pull this out. But then I have seen miraculous comebacks in the fourth quarter of basketball games, maybe the last 2 minutes, in the bottom of the ninth, where you've just about written off any chance of victory at all, and all of a sudden you come from behind. So whether it's soccer, baseball, basketball, or whatever, we all have experienced those situations that give us hope, that even though the clock is ticking down as it is on this debt limit date, even though some are saying we're never going to get there, I'm hopeful that we can come forward with a sensible plan. And in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, the cut, cap, and balance is a plan that can get us to where we need to go. Clearly, we need first, and cut does this, we need first to address our spending issue, and then cap, so that we don't keep running into this year after year, and then balance so that we're committed to it for the long term. And in order to get there, this provision before us gives us the opportunity to do that, just that. The reforms that we need to address, not just cutting, but addressing the out-of-control, deficit-driving entitlement programs that need to be reformed in order to save those benefits and save those programs for the future, not take them away, and not watch it go into insolvency. All those need to be addressed, and I hope that they will be, and this is the plan that can get us there. So we'll be voting on this, now learn tomorrow morning, and I'm just urging my colleagues to look at this in a serious way. There's been a lot of criticism of various plans that Republicans have put forward, and yet the President hasn't put anything forward. And my colleagues across the aisle, the Democrats, haven't put a budget forward or a plan forward. And so, yeah, we get criticism because they don't like this part of our plan or they don't like that part of our plan, and we're not saying our plan is perfect, but where's yours? We have nothing to measure it against. Democrats are in the majority in the United States Senate. Republicans are a minority party. But nothing has been brought forward here for us to debate, to vote on. There's no way we can stand here and say, well, here's our plan. What do you like about it? What do you don't like about it? Or us to stand here and say, you to stand there and say, here's our plan. Let's work together to meld these two things together. Maybe we can find a compromise. No, nothing has been provided by the other side. And so, yes, we're here with cut, cap, and balance. And people have said, no, that's not the one. And people have said Gang of Six, no, that's not the one. And people have said other provisions that have been brought forward, no, that's not the one. Well, okay, fine. You don't like that? What is the one? What is the one that gets us there? So as we approach here the very end of all this, we have to understand the consequences of what we do are enormous. And doing what is right for the future of America and the future of the American people, the future of our generations to follow, is what ought to be driving us at this point toward reaching a rational, sensible solution to put us on the path to fiscal responsibility and get our financial house in order. And so just hours left before we have this vote. And if this vote doesn't pass, and many are predicting it won't, the President has said he will veto it if it does, I'm still hopeful that we can pull something out here in the bottom of the ninth. And if it doesn't pass, where do we go next? So we need leadership. We need leadership from the leader of our country to guide us as to where we need to go if they're going to just simply reject everything that we put forward. Let's be very careful how we evaluate our vote tomorrow and the implications that it has for the future of this country and the fact that the clock is ticking ever louder as we careen toward a serious crisis on August the 2nd. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
I can he'll be bringing you something.
I was sworn into office this January, about 6 months ago, the House and the Senate have both been understandably, properly concerned with one issue that has perhaps eclipsed every other issue that has come before us in this half-year period of time. That related to our national debt and the anticipated expiration of our debt limit, which will hit in just a couple of weeks. Many Americans are understandably concerned and have articulated the concern that if we pass the debt limit deadline of August 2nd without raising the debt limit, there could be catastrophic financial consequences. In light of that, I, along with a number of my Republican colleagues, both in the Senate and in the House, have introduced legislation called the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act to address the debt limit, to address it head-on. And it says that we'll raise the debt limit if three conditions are met. First, if we make significant cuts to domestic discretionary spending for the fiscal year 2012 budget. Second, we need statutory spending caps to put us on a smooth but steady glide path toward balancing our budget sometime within the next decade. Third, we need a balanced budget amendment passed out of Congress and submitted to the states for ratification. We think all three of these steps are necessarily required before we take the significant additional step of raising the debt limit, because of the fact that it took us a long time to get to this point, to the point where by the end of the year we will have accumulated $15 trillion in debt, about $50,000 for every man, woman, and child in America, and between $120,000 and $150,000 for every wage earner in America. This is a lot of money. Before we extend that debt limit, again, by an additional $2.4 trillion, we have to solve the problem. We have to address the problem that led to its creation in a real, lasting, binding, fundamental way. That's why the most critical part of this legislation, while each part is important, happens to be found in that which rests upon the idea of a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. You see, because we, as members of Congress, could decide right now that over the next 10 years or 15 years that it might be a good idea to cut spending by $2 trillion, $3 trillion, 4, 5, 6, perhaps more. But if we made that promise today as a down payment to the American people in exchange for the permission of the people to raise the debt limit, it's a promise that we can't really make good on because we can't bind a future Congress. This Congress was sworn in January of 2011. Elections will be held in November of 2012, and a new Congress will be sworn in based on those elections in January 2013. The same thing will happen again in January of 2015 and every 2 years after that for the duration of our republic. The decisions that we make right here, right now, can affect the here and now and can be binding for the here and now. But we can't reasonably expect, and we can't ask the American people, when making a decision so long-lasting and precedent-setting as this one, to simply trust us that future Congresses will see things the same way that we do. The only way that we can bind a future Congress is by amending our law of laws, that 224-year-old document painstakingly ironed out by some of the brightest men of the last several centuries in Philadelphia 224 years ago. When we amend the Constitution, we make it possible to bind a future Congress, and that's what we need to do. Now, we've had some interesting debate and discussion surrounding this proposal. Last Friday, I listened with surprise and dismay as our President said, we don't need to amend the Constitution to require a balanced budget, but we do need to balance our budget. In the President's opinion, Congress just needs to do its job, not amend the Constitution. I think I understand his point. I think he's suggesting that for Congress to do its job, it needs to balance its budget. But I have to ask the question, how has that worked out for us? Have past Congresses balanced their budgets? Has the current Congress balanced its budget? Overwhelmingly, the answer is no. It happens every now and again. Some would describe those instances where it has balanced in the last 2 or 3 decades as an accident, others a momentary blip. Still others would suggest that it was the product of accounting gimmickry rather than an actual act of budget balancing when that occurred. But regardless, we know that balanced federal budgets are newsworthy indeed because they're very rare. I look forward to the day when they're no longer newsworthy, when they're customary. And the only way to make them customary, based on our experience as Americans throughout most of our nation's history, is by amending the Constitution to require it, to make this a binding and permanent law. I was shocked and dismayed again to learn that our Senate Majority Leader, Senator Reid from Nevada, stated just a few hours ago that he doesn't like this legislation. He made some very disparaging comments about it, notwithstanding the fact and completely ignoring the fact that this isn't just the best legislation to address the debt limit issue. Right now, it's the only legislation. It is the only legislation that addresses this issue that is moving through Congress, that's been reduced to legislative language. Certainly the only one that's been passed by one body of Congress and is now moving over to the United States Senate. And so he's criticizing something when he himself hasn't offered anything up. This is the only show in town. And given how close we now are to the August 2nd deadline, in part because we've punted this so long, in part because we haven't been having the debate and the discussion in Congress that we should have been having for months, this is it. This is the only proposal. Now, if Senator Reid has suggestions on how we might change this proposal, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear what they are. If he has his own proposal, I'd love to see what that is. But simply to stand from that desk over there and disparage this legislation is inexcusable, absolutely inexcusable, given the fact that he has offered nothing. Let me read some of his words. He said, "The American people should understand that this meaning the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, is a bad piece of legislation, perhaps some of the worst legislation in the history of this country." I don't know what he's referring to. He didn't give specifics, nor has he given any specifics on what he would like to see in its place or how it could be improved. So my suggestion to our Senate Majority Leader is, if you've got ideas, please put them on the table. Because as we approach this debt limit deadline, we're running out of time. The clock has been ticking for 6 months. We've known this was going to happen. This is not news to us. So why then has there been so little debate and discussion in this body? Why is it that we spent weeks and weeks and weeks often dealing with legislation that paled in comparison to the importance of this issue? The clock kept ticking, and we kept debating and discussing other legislation far, far less important. This, in my opinion, was a gross dereliction of duty. But we've still got a few weeks. We can still deal with it. We can still address it. I suggest strongly that we address it by starting with that legislation that has actually been proposed and that we have full debate and discussion. But no, we're told. Even after the House of Representatives earlier this week passed the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, passed it with bipartisan support, by the way. No fewer than 5 members of the Democratic caucus in the House of Representatives voted to support this. So that was passed Tuesday night. We were told later that we'd be having a vote on Saturday or perhaps Monday. And then just a little while ago, we were informed by the Senate Majority Leader that the vote would be tomorrow, giving us little or no time for actual debate and discussion on the floor of what is still to this moment the only legislation moving through to address this issue. Now, this is not an appropriate moment for demagoguery. Demagoguery on an issue this important can result in a lot of unnecessary pain. No one disputes that there could be significant negative economic consequences associated with not raising the debt limit. I don't dispute that, not for a moment. That's exactly why I put my neck on the line in order to file this legislation, because nothing else was moving forward. I didn't want to do it, but when I was sworn in as a U.S. Senator just a few months ago, I understood that it was my obligation to do what I could to make things better, to make our constitutional system work. So I filed it. It's an insult not only to me and to my colleagues, but to all Americans when addressing an issue this important. To have so little debate and discussion over this issue, I find it appalling. I find it reprehensible. I demand an explanation, and I demand an alternative solution if the Senate Majority Leader is going to pick this apart and say that he won't do it. Moreover, I will remind the Senate Majority Leader that just a few short years ago, in 2006, when we had a different president belonging to a different party, and this body was in control of another party, if my memory serves me correctly, not only did then-Senator Barack Obama vote against raising the debt limit, calling the need to do so the product of a failure of leadership that he wasn't willing to condone and perpetuate, but every single one of his Democratic colleagues joined him in that vote. Not one of them voted to raise the debt limit. So here we are again, approaching the debt limit. Here we are again, with only Republicans stepping up to the plate and offering a solution. Only this time, the solution is a permanent one. Unfortunately, in 2006, and in prior and in subsequent debt limit extension votes, there was no serious debate attached to it as to a permanent solution. We have to amend the governing document, the law of laws, the only kind of law that can bind future Congresses in order to solve this problem. We have to do it now. This is part of what it means to be an American. We as Americans crave liberty, and we eschew tyranny to any degree. Every single time we authorize deficit spending, we fuel the unfettered expansion of the federal government and all of its power. We commit ourselves and our posterity to a future that will include working more and more hours and days and weeks and even months just to pay their federal tax bills every single year. That's time that they won't get back. That's time that we won't get back. That erodes our individual liberty. It also erodes our liberty when the same regulatory structure that exists today grows bigger and bigger every year, because we're borrowing now more than $1.5 trillion every single year. Not because of some aberrational condition, some unusual development that requires an unusual expenditure of borrowed money, but just to cover our basic day-to-day operations. This is what fuels the perpetual expansion of government, and when government expands perpetually, our individual liberty is diminished severely, unfortunately, and to a corresponding degree. This is unacceptable. But there is a way home. The way home is found in limiting the role of government. And you can limit the role of government most effectively at this point in time, I believe, by limiting the pool of money to which Congress has access. The only way to do that is through a constitutional amendment. I want to close by addressing one final argument that's sometimes been used in response to and against the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act. Many of its detractors are making a claim that I find extraordinary, a claim that says, why are you even supporting this because it can't pass? It's a little bit like saying, why do we even play the Super Bowl when it's expected that one team is going to beat the other team? You have to play, but this one isn't a game. This one is for real. And when we vote, after debating and discussing, members of this body can and will be held accountable to our constituents. So it will be up to me and each of my colleagues in this body to decide how to vote on this issue. For those who make the unfortunate decision to vote against this, notwithstanding the fact that 75% of the American people strongly support the idea of a balanced budget amendment, notwithstanding the fact that 66% of Americans, both of these figures according to a CNN poll released today, support the principles underlying cut, cap, and balance. Notwithstanding the fact that this is the only permanent way of solving our debt problem, if members of Congress and members of this body choose to vote against this legislation, they'll do so, I believe, at their own peril. They'll have to face their constituents and explain why a handful of them were unwilling to raise the debt limit, unwilling to address this problem, unwilling to fix the perpetual deficit spending habit of Congress, simply because they did not want a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. I think that's a tall order. I think that's difficult to explain. I think those who try to make that explanation to their constituents will do so at their own political peril. But more importantly, the vote they cast will be at the peril of the people of the United States of America, of their liberty, of their economic stability, and of their ability to prosper now and in the future. We can turn this ship around, but in order to do it, we need robust debate and discussion. And our constituents deserve more. The American people deserve more than to have the kind of sleight of hand scheduling and the kind of dismissive, cavalier attitude toward what is being characterized correctly by many as the fight of an entire generation. We need to pass the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act. It's not only the best solution, it's the only solution. The time's running out, and I urge each of my colleagues to support this. Thank you, Mr. President.
President, I appreciate the senator from Utah, and I'm just a bit taken aback by the majority leader's decision to alter the course that I thought we were on that would allow for debate and work on a bill to deal with the budget, the debt ceiling, and our budget deficit tomorrow. And some of his comments that he made today after he changed his mind yesterday, he said, I'm committed to allowing a fair and full debate on this bill. I want the proponents and opponents to have time to air their views and so forth. Then he says, I think this piece of legislation is about as weak and senseless as anything that has ever come before the Senate. Quote, I'm not going to waste the Senate's time day after day on this piece of legislation, which I think is an anathema to what our country is about. And he goes on to say the American people should understand this is a bad piece of legislation, perhaps the worst legislation in the history of the country. That's what the majority leader said just a few hours ago. Let me ask Senator Lee. He's newly elected from the state of Utah. He traveled all over the state. Did you share with your people at various times in your efforts that you thought a constitutional amendment, like so many states have, to contain spending is good and sound policy? Did they hold that against you? Or do you think your election was an affirmation of the cry of the American people that we take some action that would actually constrain spending?
On countless occasions throughout the state of Utah, I've articulated the fact that I believe we have no business raising the debt limit without first adopting permanent structural change in the form of a constitutional balanced budget amendment. And the people of Utah elected me, in part based on that promise. Elections have consequences. And in my case, this was one of them.
Well, Senator Lee, I just am flabbergasted by this, the majority leader's comments. He said, quote, I think this piece of legislation is about as weak and senseless as anything that has ever come up on the Senate floor. Well, wouldn't you say that compared to all the other legislation that we're talking about passing, and some of it has some teeth to it, I acknowledge, but compared to all of that, a constitutional amendment that requires us to live within our means is certainly not a weak piece of legislation.
I would hardly call it weak. Quite to the contrary. Calls for legislation like this date back a couple of hundred years. Thomas Jefferson was arguably the first one to suggest this kind of proposal. He called for it again and again, and those calls have continued throughout most of our history, but they've accelerated in recent decades. They've accelerated because this body has refused to balance its budget, and it's abused its borrowing power to the point where we're now spending more than $1.5 trillion a year, more than we bring in every single year. It's bankrupting our country. We're burying our children under a mountain of debt. We're killing jobs. We're spending money we don't have, and that's wrong. I would hardly call legislation designed to deal with that in a permanent, binding way senseless. And I'm insulted that the majority leader would suggest that this is somehow senseless just because he doesn't like it, because it'll make him less powerful.
Well, I think that's getting to the nub of the matter. I think it's a sense in which, now, for a constitutional amendment to pass, it has to have two-thirds vote in the Congress, both houses, and three-fourths of the states. But once passed, no majority leader could come in next year and say, well, yeah, I know I've been in favor of balanced budgets, but I don't want to do it this year. I got more spending I want to occur. It would indeed curb the power of the majority leader and actually some newly constituted Senate to spend more money than the government takes in, would it not?
Yes, it would. It's the whole purpose of the Balanced Budget Amendment is to restrict our power and give that power back to the people where it belongs. The power has been abused here. It's been abused over a prolonged period of time, and it's been abused to a severe degree. This is why the election of 2010 brought about some significant outcomes.
I couldn't agree more. I think the American people rightly have concluded that a Congress of the United States that borrows 40% of the amount of money it spends because it's spending more money than it takes in is acting irresponsibly. As I've noted earlier, somebody says, oh, you know, the Tea Party isn't angry. Well, why shouldn't they be angry? We've completely mismanaged the American people's business. We're elected to be responsible leaders. Nobody, I believe, would come to the floor of this Senate, I'd like to see it if it happens, and defend what we're doing, borrowing 40 cents of every dollar we spend, no matter what it's on. And the President proposes budgets next year that would include 10% increase for education, 10% increase for energy, 10% increase for the State Department, and we're spending money that we don't have. So I think a constitutional amendment will require a major participation by the American people, and all the states of America would discuss it. And if the American people decided that they felt that Congress needed to be restrained and passed that constitutional amendment, what's wrong with that? Isn't that a legitimate way for the American people to have their voice expressed according to the Constitution?
There's nothing wrong with it, and quite to the contrary. This is exactly the kind of activity that our Constitution contemplates, authorizes, and with good reason. And I should note here that it's significant that in this body, each state is represented equally. A relatively small state like mine, the state of Utah, has the same number of senators as a really large, heavily populated state like California or like New York. Because we represent the states. We represent the states as states. That's one of our jobs, is to make sure that their sovereign interests are vindicated in this body. To suggest that we shouldn't balance our budget, to suggest that we shouldn't even propose a balanced budget amendment to be considered by the states, keeping in mind that it's the states ultimately that ratify it, if three-fourths of them choose to do so, is insulting to the very states that we represent. It somehow suggests that our states can't handle it when the states overwhelmingly, almost every one of them, balance their budgets every year.
Well, I agree with that, and it's just odd to me, and I think contrary to the heritage of the Senate. I'm confident it's contrary to the heritage of the Senate for the majority leader to assume as much power as is being assumed now. I am ranking member on the Budget Committee, and essentially the Democratic leadership told the Budget Committee not to even mark up a budget this year, even though the statutes of the United States, in the United States Code, requires Congress to have a budget. I know that the Senator is a skilled lawyer. His father was Solicitor General of the United States, one of the most prestigious, the most probably prestigious position a lawyer can have in America, in my opinion. To be able to stand before the United States Supreme Court and to represent the United States government in court is the honor that's very high. But anyway, so he's a student of the law, and I know you're familiar that the statutes of the United States require a budget. It doesn't say you go to jail if you don't, I'll admit, but it says we should have a budget. Don't you think the people in Utah, and I think the people in Alabama, would think we should have a budget because it's the right thing to do, number one, and number two, we should do it because it's the law?
It is the law, and notwithstanding the fact that we don't have a court order enjoining us to do that, we still have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution. And I think that means that especially on an issue so fundamental, so important, so sweeping as the budgeting process, we should be complying with that law, or at least making an effort to do so. What I see here is not only a lack of effort to comply with that law, but a deliberate, conscious effort made with malice aforethought to avoid the law. That's damaging. That's wrong.
And Senator Lee, the House of Representatives passed this bill, passed it by more than a few votes to spare, and sent it here, and I believe if the American people knew what was in it, they would favor it. The people in my state would favor it, and I think American people would favor it. How do you think the good people in the House, the good people of America, who overwhelmingly favor restraint in spending and balancing our budget, how do you think they would feel about the leader curtailing our debate on this important subject and saying, quote, "I think this piece of legislation is about as weak and senseless as anything that has ever come on this Senate floor. I'm not going to waste the Senate's time," close quote, on it.
I think the American people would be profoundly disappointed by that statement. More importantly, they'd be profoundly disgusted by the fact that it wasn't enough for the Senate Majority Leader simply to say, "I disagree with it," or to point out areas in which he might disagree with it or might want to improve upon it. He went so far as to say, "It's not even worth our time to debate and discuss this." That smacks of tyranny. Americans don't respond well to tyranny, and this is unacceptable.
I have to say, I think we're having a problem here in the Senate. I really consider the Majority Leader a friend. I know it's a very, very difficult job. I've said that many times. I wouldn't want it. Trent Lott said he was herding cats, or he's pushing a wheelbarrow with frogs. You put one in and two jump out. It's a tough job, but he asked for it. And the Senate is a great institution. I don't know what Robert Byrd, the late senator from West Virginia, would say if he were here. I think I know. I think he'd be very uneasy about the process that we've gone through this year, when through the power of the chair, the Majority Leader has blocked legislation after legislation, has blocked us moving forward with the budget, refusing to allow the committees to move forward, refused to allow the budget even to come up last year. We're now at, I think, 812 days without a budget in the United States Senate, running the largest deficits the nation has ever run. And those deficits are not transient things. They're not going to just turn around when the economy picks up a little bit. It's a systemic, deep, structural problem, and we are endangering our future, and we're being blocked from even being able to discuss it while people meet in secret over at the White House with the Vice President, with the President, and a few group of senators meet. Nobody elected them, but they're good people. They want to meet. That's fine. But we need to be seeing legislation, actual bills that we can take to committee and score and see how much they cost. Senator Lee, do you think, being the student of American law and the Constitution that you are, just and knowledgeable about common people, don't you think that the American people think that something wrong with this process, where we've gone all year long and not done anything of significance to deal with the most significant issue facing our nation maybe in the next decade, and that is the size of our debt?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, the American people understand that power is most dangerous in government when it's consolidated into the hands of just a few people. It becomes even more dangerous when that power is wielded under cover of darkness. It's the great thing about sunlight. It illuminates and it disinfects. We need that illumination and that disinfectant in this process, because this process is corrupt. A process that allows something of this such profound importance to be decided by just a small handful of people who tell their colleagues, you plebeians, don't worry about it. This is for us high-minded people. We will decide, you will follow, and we'll do it in such a way that you won't have time to read it, to review it, to debate it, to discuss it. This is corrupt, and it has to end.
I think what you said, Senator, is sadly too truthful. I do believe this is a corruption of the process. I believe it's been happening over a period of time since I've been here. I've seen it happen more and more. Both parties have done a lot of this, but I do believe it's reached a new height this year. I think Senator Reid believes in the Senate. I think he respects the Senate. I really do. But I think he's under constant pressure, and they've decided that some of his members, I guess, didn't want to stay here this weekend. They wanted to go home. They had a speech they wanted to give, or a party they wanted to attend to, or a fundraising event they wanted to go to, so they don't want to stay here this weekend. Just yesterday, I think it was, Senator Reid was complaining about the House going home this weekend and promising we'd stay here and we'd work. Now, all of a sudden, anybody that stays here and wants to vote on a bill that passed by a substantial majority in the House of Representatives, he says is acting as he says the bill's an anathema to the Senate and senseless and not worth our time to talk about. How does he get to decide this?
He gets to decide it only if we allow him to decide it. We outnumber him, and if we vote contrary to his will, we can overrule him. If enough members of this body are willing to stand up for truth and justice and the American way, debate and discussion and the rule of law, this thing that he's trying to do to us won't happen. We can have actual debate and discussion. Now, look, we've responded. We've responded politely and well to his directive that we would stay here this weekend. We've made plans. We've canceled plans in our home states. And all of a sudden, his high and mighty speech earlier this week telling us we had to stay here is no longer important when he disagrees with some legislation we put forward. He would rather shut down debate and discussion. He would rather end the process that is absolutely necessary to avert this crisis that is quickly coming than he would to have to confront the facts, offer up his own solution, and respond to the valid points that will be made in this debate and this discussion.
It's an important issue, I think. I really do. And I just want to make this point. There's only one bill that's passed and been advocated, actually it's on the floor of the Senate, that raises the debt ceiling and changes our debt course in America. And that's the bill that the Senator from Utah has brought up, the cut, cap, and balance bill that he's been so articulately describing and advocating. That's the only bill. They say that this is senseless. Well, do you have anything that raises the debt ceiling and does something about the debt of America? Does anybody else in the Senate, or if they bring it up, will they be blocked from bringing it up? I don't see it. The only legislation is this legislation. It's not senseless. It's very significant. When I came to the Senate the first year in 1997, we voted on an amendment to balance the budget, a constitutional amendment. We thought the votes were there to pass it. Taking all the people that had voted for it and what they said they were going to vote, there were enough votes to pass it. It appeared, and at the last moment, several senators changed their vote, and it only got 66. Had it had 67, it would have gone to the states. I'm convinced that balanced budget amendment would have passed. And had it passed, we wouldn't be in the financial crisis we're in today. Now, that's fact, I believe. So I don't think this is a senseless process. I believe people, if they don't agree with this legislation, they don't agree with it, let's hear why. But just to come down and trash it, trash the members of the House who voted for it, trash the American people.
Senator's time has expired.
I thank the Chair and would ask consent to have one additional minute.
Is there objection? Without objection, minute is granted.
Just an inquiry, was there a time limit on this?
There was a time limit earlier, and it was 5 to 8 equally divided. And now a member of the other side is here. All the remaining time has expired on the minority.
I thank the presiding officer for his courtesy and would just say that, forgive me if I'm a little bit offended. I don't think it's wrong to be offended. Majority Leader walks in here and says a piece of legislation that is critical, I believe, to the future of America is senseless, not worth discussing. He changes his mind entirely and going to file a motion. I guess he figures he'll have the majority members on his party will stick with him and then just kill off the legislation tomorrow morning. And I think it's a very valid piece of legislation, an important piece of legislation, the only piece of legislation in the Senate that would raise the debt ceiling. I really think that it's worthy of respect, it's worthy of full debate, and ought not to be demeaned in the way it has. And I respect my friend, the Majority Leader. I'm sure it's a frustrating job, and every now and then you kind of say things maybe you wish you hadn't, but I don't think this is a senseless piece of legislation. I think it's important and worthy of the greatest consideration in the Senate, and I thank Senator Lee for his efforts to promote it. I would yield the floor.